This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Much has been discussed, especially on this channel, about the rise of Reform UK. Considering how recently they've entered the political scene, it's unsurprising how much attention the media gives them. At the moment, they're polling in the same region as the Conservatives and Labour. In fact, in certain polls, Reform have polled even higher than the two major parties, leading some journalists to begin asking questions about whether Farage could be headed for number 10. Now, we've already made a handful of videos on this very prospect, but something we haven't really queried is whether this is all just a bit of media speculation. After all, Reform did well in 2024, but they only won 5 seats, and it's not as if it's unusual for Farage's outfits to poll really well temporarily and then fade into irrelevance. So, in this video, we're going to have a look at Reform's current polling, and whether it's actually overhyped. Who is the most influential person in the world? Well, with your help, we've put together a full ranking. Learn the top 10 in the video linked below, or pick up a copy of our magazine for the full list. Now, as we pointed out in the introduction, Reform has been polling particularly well in the last few months. One of the most recent and most significant polls to give them an edge on the other parties was April's More in Common MRP poll. On the surface, the poll showed what all other polls show these days: a tie between Reform, Labour and the Tories. But as an MRP poll, which surveyed over 16,000 people, it also predicted how many seats each of the parties would win in a hypothetical election. Astonishingly, it showed that Reform would come first, with 180 seats, with Labour and the Tories in second place on just 153. This would mean that Labour would lose 246 seats. Obviously, this would be utterly devastating for the two main parties, but even more than that, it would demonstrate the end of an era for British party politics. No longer would elections be dominated by the Tories and Labour, no longer would small parties be largely ignored, and for many voters, no longer would their vote be determined by who they assess to be the least worst option. In other words, it could utterly destroy the two-party system as we know it. However, as we see it, there are 3 reasons that Reform support may actually be overhyped: a lack of popular policies, internal political problems, and the historic treatment of smaller parties. Let's look at these in turn. Now, Reform UK as a party are clearly trying to imitate the right-wing populist wave that has swept across the Western world in the last few years. There are, though, 2 main issues with this. The first is that Reform's policy platform just isn't as geared towards the younger generation as populist parties in other countries. In France, for instance, Marine Le Pen's National Rally has promised that it would eliminate income tax for under 30s, give young people up to €300 a month for training and apprenticeships, and expand interest-free loans for first-time home buyers. This isn't something that Farage seems to be doing. While Farage does make an effort to engage with the younger generation on TikTok, Reform ultimately has few policies aimed at Gen Z. Housing is the second most important issue to 18 to 24-year-olds, behind only the economy. Despite this, Reform has no big policies designed to attract those that feel that the Tories and Labour haven't done enough on housing, or, for what it's worth, on the personal finances of the younger generation. This is an issue. One of the big advantages of being a populist is that you can attract voters who feel that the political establishment aren't doing enough for them, such as the younger generations. The fact that only 6% of 18 to 24-year-olds backed Reform in the latest YouGov poll shows just how little headway Reform have made. The thing is, though, it's not just the younger generation that Reform is failing to capture. A number of their policies are just unpopular with the electorate at large, mainly their climate stance and ideological closeness to Trump. Analysis from More in Common found that a plurality of Brits are worried about climate change, and that, by a margin of 6-1, Brits back investment into renewables, with even Reform voters backing green investment by a margin of 2-1. Similarly, a majority of Brits agreed that Farage was best described as the British Donald Trump, and that such a description is negative. If Farage is serious about power, he needs to come up with some policies that can actually excite the electorate. Anyway, moving on to the second main reason that Reform may be overhyped: internal political problems. As we saw earlier in the year, Reform doesn't exactly appear like the most united party. A rift between Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe, another of Reform's MPs, caused something of a factional fight. Now, to be fair, this wasn't actually in the news all that long, nor did it cut through and negatively affect polling. The issue is, though, that it shows that Farage is already starting to experience the same problems he experienced as leader of UKIP and the Brexit Party. New political upstarts tend to attract candidates that are individualistic, as they have little historic ties to the organisation itself. The biggest problem with this is that members of the party can quickly get fed up or frustrated with the leader, and the lack of spotlight on themselves can breed infighting and splits. Sure, so far we've only seen one of these, but it's quite possible that this is merely the start, and the party goes the same way that UKIP did. The other internal problem Reform is struggling with right now is funding. Between now and the next general election, the party needs to raise between £30 million and £40 million in order to build a large enough support base to actually win a majority. According to the FT, so far Reform's efforts to attract donors just haven't been all that successful, and they've failed to attract many large donations. If they want to be taken more seriously, they're going to have to seriously step these efforts up. So, moving on to the final reason that Reform may be overhyped: historic factors. As we've mentioned in some previous videos, this isn't the first time in history that a third party has been polling well. Back in 2019, the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats were polling at a similar level to that of the Tories and Labour. Following the decision by the Brexit Party not to field candidates against the Tories, the polling effectively returned back to normal. What this shows is that changes on the political scene can wipe away strong third-party polling. At the end of the day, first-past-the-post just tends to produce and perpetuate a two-party system. In political science circles, this is known as Duverger's law. Essentially, while Reform looks pretty good right now, the system itself will work against them in the long run. So, all in all, it looks like things certainly do look good for Reform right now, but they could find maintaining this strong position difficult in the long run. At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you learn more about the world around you. Luckily for us, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, shares this same commitment. Their thousands of interactive lessons in maths, science, programming, data analysis, and AI are designed to help you learn by actually doing, rather than asking you to mindlessly memorize stuff. For instance, each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. This helps you build your critical thinking skills and ultimately become a better thinker. Brilliant's newly updated maths courses help you establish a strong foundation in algebra, then helps you build on this, teaching you how to conquer calculus, all while maintaining an emphasis on problem solving and reasoning. The thing I like best about this, though, is that their mathematical courses help you develop your mathematical intuition and fluency, skills that you can use in the real world. As we've told you before, data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, or you can click on the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.